when I talk about having a guide, it's somebody to ask me the questions and help me get in touch with my intuition and get in touch with what I know, to help me celebrate the wins, because sometimes I don't think I could even see the wins, remind me of the things in my toolbox, reflect back to me what I was saying or not saying, what my body language maybe had been saying that I wasn't saying. These are all the kinds of things that I do for my clients that I think would have been really helpful for me.
Welcome to Making Change with Your Money, a podcast that highlights the stories and strategies of women who experienced a big life transition and overcame challenges as they redefined financial success for themselves. Now here's your host, certified financial planner, Laura Rotter.
I am so excited to have as my guest today, Deborah Donenfeld. Deborah is the owner of Photosynthesis Coaching and a life coach specializing in supporting people in midlife who are starting over. She's been coaching for 13 years and moved into this niche when her own life was turned upside down and she found herself in the position of navigating several big and painful changes all at once. Deborah coaches from the heart and compassionately helps her clients to work their edge and move through tough changes with grace. So welcome, Deborah, to the Making Change with Your Money podcast.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here.
I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, me too.
I'm going to start like I always do, which is, what was money like in your family growing up, Deborah?
That's interesting. Money in my family, I grew up in a suburb of New York City and didn't want for anything. We had certainly enough to put food on the table, to clothe us, to do a lot of the things that we wanted to do. And yet, I think because a lot of our neighbors were more wealthy than we were, it always felt like we didn't quite have enough. We were always, I say my siblings and I, maybe I should just speak for myself. I was always being reminded that, well, we can't do that. They can do those things, but we can't do those things. They can have that kind of clothing, but we can't have that. And so it was a very strange situation of poverty mindset in a situation where we were not in poverty. And so that sort of led me to always quite feel like we don't have enough. We're not as good as the others. We can't do the things that other people can do. We're always struggling, even though we weren't really.
Thank you for sharing that. It's interesting. You're reminding me of, I think I read a study where people were asked, would you prefer to earn, I'm going to pick a number out of my hat, like $50,000 when everybody else earns $20,000 or $50,000 and everybody else earns $100,000. It was probably a larger number than 50, and the preference is always to be the one earning more money. That there really is a sense of scarcity.
That's an interesting question, because I wonder, the third question to me is, option C, to earn $50,000 where everybody else is earning $50,000. I wonder how many people would choose to not be above or below, but to be like everybody else.
I think you're right. I think most would prefer to just everyone feel. And the younger you are, right before to ask for the clothes or the vacations or whatever else came up, you probably feel like everyone's the same.
Hey, you're not even thinking about it, right?
You're not even noticing differences until you get to a certain age. I'm curious, Deborah, where are you in the birth order and how many siblings do you have?
I'm the eldest. I think maybe if you know me, that's obvious.
You're the responsible one? Is that?
Yeah, the responsible one, the one who sort of takes charge. Yeah. And I have two younger siblings.
And mix of boys and girls?
Yeah, I have a younger brother, and then the youngest is my sister.
Interesting. I'm always curious, since I've been doing these interviews, was your brother treated any differently than you and your sister? Were there different expectations that you could sense?
Yeah, I think that's the key that I could sense growing up, right? my father was very hard on him in a lot of ways because he was really a hippie with long hair, and or he wanted to be, and my father would make him get a haircut, and he and would just not have any of that in the house. So I think in that way he was harder on him in that way. I think that there were probably a lot of differences that I did not notice growing up. And I think being the oldest, if you asked my siblings, I think they probably had a bigger awareness of how I was treated as opposed to them. I remember my sister, I came home maybe during college or something, and I spilled something on the table. And she stood up and she said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you spilled something. I spill my milk every night. You never spill anything. Nothing ever. You never do anything wrong." And I thought, I had no idea this was all in there. Like I didn't even know this was a thing. So I think being the oldest, sometimes you're maybe not as quite as aware as the younger siblings are of those differences.
Yes, especially if there's a big enough age difference so that the two youngest are more of a couple
Right.
than, which it sounds like out of the
Well,
house
I was out of the house
before.
before them. I mean, it was pretty even. It was about 2 years in between each of us. A little, but still, I left the house first, right?
And what was the expectation, or was there an expectation around education?
Oh, yes. The expectation is, you're going to do really well in school, get good grades so that you can get into a good college. And then you're going to, you know, go to college and get good grades so that you can get a good job. I wouldn't say that there was an expectation about like getting a master's or going to law school or being a doctor or anything like that. Both of my siblings did go on to get to higher education. I did not. But there wasn't that expectation, but there certainly was the expectation of do well, get into a good school, do well, get a good job, climb the ladder, be loyal, all of those things that were their generation, that how they looked at work.
I was going to say that exactly paralleling what you just said, Deborah, which is it was a generational, not the expectation, of course, but of education is not necessarily generational, but the idea that you're going to be loyal to an employer, that you're going to stay somewhere and not make changes.
Absolutely.
Is really generational and shifting, I think, for many reasons, not least of which is because we're all living a long time.
Well, we're all living a long time. And I think even that generation, my father is one of them who realized that, oh, this company that I've been loyal to for 20 years actually is suddenly not loyal to me. They're not loyal to me. I thought that was the contract. We're loyal to each other. But now I see I can be discarded. And I think that was the beginning of that big change for people.
So can I take from what you just said that you actually saw your father losing?
I did. I was older. I think I may have graduated college, or I think I had graduated college at this time. And he basically took an early retirement. He was given a very generous severance package. I think that they were very embarrassed and, to be letting him go. I don't remember what year it was, but I think there was a big recession and a lot of companies just laid off everybody and downsized. And I don't remember the details, but yeah, I did see him go through that. And he kind of played with having his own thing for a little while, part-time, but he basically took an early retirement. So it was fine. It was fine. There wasn't a lot of suffering because I think he was at the age where he could retire anyway. But I think it was a blow to the ego and it was a blow to his idea of the world order.
And interesting, you said he was of the age to retire, but clearly he had put in place a financial basis so that he could, in addition to the severance package.
Oh, yes. He was very disciplined that way.
Can I then extrapolate that you and your siblings were aware of financial discipline? That's something that you certainly said that there was a scarcity mindset. So whether or not the bank account was less than neighbors, there was certainly different spending habits.
Yes, for sure. We didn't really talk much about money growing up, I would say. I saw my father, doing the books every month, paying the bills, and he'd go into his little office and, we saw him doing that but we didn't have a conversation about it. And honestly, I didn't know anything about IRAs or saving for a time. Like I had to learn that all on my own, and actually ended up coming to it pretty late because of my divorce and what happened in those years. And now I have my children in their 20s, like putting money in their IRA. I mean, this is what I did with my kids when they had to take out some loans, not a crazy amount of loans, but they had to take out some loans for college. And I said, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to pay off your loans. And then you're going to make that monthly payment every month. Half of it you're going to make to me because I paid off your loans, and half of it you're going to put in your IRA. So it kind of got them started when they could have easily said, well, I don't have the money. I don't have any money. Well, they would have had to be paying their loans off anyway. So they would have had to find it. So, yeah. And so I think it's on their radar to set money aside, make sure to be saving for retirement, even when they're young. I mean, that's when to do it because you have to put so little away for it to make a big difference.
Yes, the power of compound interest. And
yes,
you are the one teaching them because, as you said, that your parents never talked about it. Most parents never talk about it nowadays. My kids, and they're not unique, right? Graduate from college and say, how much should I spend on rent? How much should I spend on Taylor Swift concerts? Like they have no concept because nobody ever talks about it.
Yeah. And some of it is sort of, I don't want to say it's genetic, but sort of built into who they are. Some kids love to save. Some kids couldn't care less about saving. They just want to spend every last penny they have. Right. And so it's also like my daughter's a little bit like that. It has taken her a long time actually to come to the place where she feels okay spending money on herself. She still doesn't spend a lot. And that's good because she's not earning a lot yet. But it's okay to spend a little money sometimes on yourself. Like that's okay. So, with her, that's been a little bit more of the work in that area.
Yeah, it is interesting to see, right? Kids theoretically grow up in the same house with the same parents and completely different in so many aspects of their
lives. Right. Well, we still have all the societal norms about boys and girls as much as we think that we don't. We still do. And they're so built in that it's hard to undo them or not do the things that are propagating that. So there's that. And then there's genetics. They're different, right? Even though they're very similar.
So who are you? So I'm assuming that you did not have student loan debt when you graduated from college.
I did not. Yeah, I didn't have student loan debt. My parents were very disciplined and they figured out how to pay for college without us having to take out loans, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, it really is a gift. So you graduated without student loans, and what did you do and who were you in terms of your sense of discipline and your role as a woman in the world? Two variables you just touched on.
Oh, that's so interesting. Huh. Well, I mean, I had to learn all of that. Right. And I think college was the beginning of learning all of that. I did get a credit card in college to start learning how to, and my parents said, pay it all off every month.
Yes.
And I have never not paid off my credit card every month since then. They really put that, they did drill that into my head. Pay it, don't have credit card debt. So, and then I had to learn about, all the stuff that you do when you are adulting, setting up a phone and paying the bill and having a bank account and all of that stuff. And I think I learned little by little, but I never thought about retirement. I never thought about that stuff. I don't think that I had an idea that some man was going to come along and save me and take care of it all and take care of me. Ironically, I did get into a marriage where I was very dependent, and that ended up backfiring. So maybe I did play in a way, I did play into those stereotypes. I don't know that I was very feminist. I don't know that I thought that I was playing into any kind of stereotype at all, certainly not in my 20s.
How old were you when you got married?
I was very young. I was 23. There's a whole story. There's a backstory around that. But yeah, I was 23 and I stayed married for 22 years.
Wow. Okay. So it wasn't a very obviously bad marriage at the beginning.
Not as obvious as it was later, for sure.
So what did you do when you graduated from college? Were you someone who was driven and had a goal, or?
Well, so I think back to what we were talking about earlier of what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to get good grades and then go to school and get good grades in everything across the board and then get a job. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I thought, I majored in French literature, I minored in English literature. And then I thought, I guess I'll write because that's what I did. I read and wrote all through college. So I applied for a job at Condé Nast. Yeah. And I had an interview with the woman in personnel, and she looked at my resume, and I guess we talked for a little while, and she said, I think you'd have much more fun in the art department. And I said, oh, yes, I would have much more fun in the art department. And so I was the art assistant at Brides magazine. That was my first job out of college, which was great. I mean, it was I got more and more interested in photography. I eventually became a photographer for a long while. And it was kind of a great magazine to have a first job because we did fashion for bridesmaids and bridal. We did tabletop and not interiors, but tabletop and like bedding and that kind of thing, that kind of photography. They did food photography. They did travel photography. So I kind of got to see a lot of it and interface with a lot of different photographers. So that was really fun and a great first job.
Yeah, it sounds like sort of a sexy first
Yeah.
job. Like probably doesn't pay that much, but
No, nothing. It paid nothing.
But it's a sexy job.
It was fun. It was really interesting and got me into a whole other world that I hadn't imagined because my parents couldn't imagine that because that was not set up as a possibility, really. Yeah. So it was a fun first job.
And how did that just help our listeners understand in terms of a timeline? That job and getting married, were they sort of at the same time?
Met my husband through my work. There was a green card element to this. So that's why I married so young. I don't think I would. At the same time, we did stay together and decide to have children together. And, it was the real deal. It's just, I don't know that it would have happened quite so early. So that was a big factor. So the timeline, yes, I graduated college, got this first job out of college, got married a year later. Then I left. I decided I wanted to do my own photography, and I left that job and I was going to travel. I had come into some money. I was like, I'm just going to use this to travel. I traveled all throughout Asia for over a year and took lots of pictures, came back, decided I was going to be a photographer, did that for many years. Somewhere in between, I got a notification into my inbox about coaching, and I thought, that's for me. And then I thought, but what is it exactly? So I don't know, something bypassed my thinking brain to say, this is your calling. You need to look into this. So that's sort of the nutshell version of how I came, the timeline and how I came to do what I'm doing now. Yeah, and that was a while ago.
So a couple of questions. I guess the first one, and I also want to articulate the second, the first one being, okay, was it a decade later? You were 33 when the email came about coaching?
The email came about coaching in my early 40s.
And I'm just trying to get a sense again of who you are. You've already said, okay, you're the oldest, so you take responsibility. And even the fact that you got married at 23 says to me that you're relatively mature. Not every 23-year-old would even be ready to get married. Okay, so you're shaking your head, so what were your strengths that had you? I mean, you're clearly a visual person. You wanted to do photography. You were in the arts department. What other?
I think the thing for me that links, yes, I am a visual person. I do love photography still. The kind of photography I was doing was mainly portrait photography. And I think that what links it for me is an ability and desire to connect with other people. So for me, photography was all about, first of all, I need to get you to trust me very quickly. And I want to elicit something of the essence of who you are so that's the picture we're taking. And with coaching, people need to trust me very quickly, and I need to be able to get to the essence of who they are and what they're going through and help them to access their own inner knowing about who they are so that they can sort of blossom in that way. So I feel like it doesn't seem like it should be similar, But I feel like there's a similarity, certainly for the way that I do photography and the way that I do coaching. And so I think if we're talking about like, who am I? Like, I think that this is key. Like, I love to connect. I love having this conversation with you. I love to connect in a deep, authentic way with people. And that's the thread. That was even the thread. I mean, going back to college. I mean, in some ways, I always joke that I've never gotten over not living in the dorm anymore. Like, I love to just be with everybody, and connecting and hearing about their day and talking through all the stuff.
And what was going on for you, Deborah, that this came into your inbox and you were ready for a change?
I think that so I didn't think of it as a change at the time. I think I thought of it as sort of something additional. And I think it came into my inbox at a time where I was having some back issues. And I thought, maybe eventually I'm not going to be able to do photography. Like, it's very physical. Maybe I should have something else that I'm starting to build up. And, I did deal with the back issues, and I actually don't have back issues anymore, but yeah, but I was really sort of intrigued by it. And there was a time when I got a certification through a program, and I thought, well, this is great. And I'll let people know. And if I get a few clients, if they fall out of the sky, that's great. But I'm really focused on my photography. And at some point, that's flopped. And where now I'm in the place where if people want to come back to me for pictures, that's great. I'm happy to take their picture. But I'm really, really focused on my coaching practice. Like, that's where my head is. That's what I'm doing. So there was an evolution. I don't know exactly how it happened.
And what do you think had it flip?
I think I started doing more and more coaching, and I just loved it so much. And maybe my ability to market myself for photography felt like it had sort of run its course. This was not a conscious decision, like a conscious thought that I had at the time, but it could have had something to do with that. But I think I was doing some group coaching in work environment. I was doing more individual coaching. I decided I wanted to get an additional certification. I wanted to be certified by the International Coaching Federation. So I did that, and I just became very, very engaged. And it just kind of happened. I was spending more and more time thinking about it and doing it.
Yeah, I think you develop a kind of confidence, which comes from competence, which comes from confidence. They sort of feed on each other, but the more that you feel like this is what I want to be doing, so this is the webinars I want to be on and the workshops I want to go to, and that you do sort of.
And then you attract that to yourself. The more you put that energy out, then that's what you're attracting to yourself.
Yes.
So the more I did it, the more I put out that energy, the more they came back to me, the more I did it, right? It just goes around and around.
So please share with our listeners who you enjoy coaching, who you're attracted to work with.
I went through a lot of really, really big changes. When I did get divorced, it was a lot of changes at once. It wasn't just the divorce. At the time that I was getting divorced, I found out that my husband's business had completely tanked. There was zero. There was zero in the account. And then we had enough to just pay our next mortgage payment in our personal account. So it was hugely shocking. I thought I was going to stay in our apartment with our kids when we divorced, but now clearly we had to sell our apartment. So there was that. And I needed to change my work because I could not support us on only my income. So it was like 4 huge changes. And so now, I'm on the other side of it, and I really just want to help people who are going through these kinds of difficult change, because I would have loved to have a guide. I would have loved to, have somebody sort of holding my hand and helping me to work it through. And, I did a lot of work myself, both pragmatically and spiritually and energetically. Like, I did all of that. But I think it doesn't have to be somebody going through like 1,000 different changes at once, but people who are going through big changes in midlife at a time when they felt like they didn't expect it, right? The rug feels like it's been pulled out from under them, whether, it's work related, or it's divorce, or it's thinking about retirement, or they've lost a spouse, or, these are really, really big changes that happen to us like well into adulthood. And so those are the people that I like to work with.
So you said that you wish that you had someone maybe to help walk you through when you went through this. And this was about a decade or so ago?
Yeah, I think it was about, 12 years ago.
So, Deborah, and this might help us imagine exactly how you now work with people, but give us an example of what you would have liked to have help with, or what helped you move through it ultimately.
Yeah, it's sort of two different questions. So
Realize
what helped me to move through it? Yeah, no, I'm trying to sort of put them together. What helped me to move through? I mean, I did everything, right? I did all of the practical stuff that you have to do, looking for work, doing odd jobs, just like one foot in front of the other, making things happen. And then I leaned in really hard to all the soft skills and the things that I've been learning and doing. So, I did yoga for a trade. I did photography for my yoga studio and was able to practice yoga all the time. I did workshops there. I did my morning practice, unfailingly every day, meditating and writing. That's super helpful. And I read self-help books and talked to friends and went to therapy, and I did all of this stuff. And luckily I had started a lot of these practices, and I'd started a lot of this sort of searching earlier. So I did have things in my toolbox to lean on. In the moments of the highest level of anxiety, I think sometimes I would forget what my tools were. And in the really highest moments of anxiety, it was very hard for me to distinguish between what was my intuition and what was my fear. And so when I talk about having a guide, it's somebody to ask me the questions and help me get in touch with my intuition and get in touch with what I know, to help me celebrate the wins, because sometimes I don't think I could even see the wins, remind me of the things in my toolbox, reflect back to me what I was saying or not saying, what my body language maybe had been saying that I wasn't saying. These are all the kinds of things that I do for my clients that I think would have been really helpful for me going through this.
what I'm hearing is that practices and soft skills, right? You start off by saying, of course, the practical things, where am I going to live? How am I going to make a living?
Right, all of that.
Of course you do, but that how important again, it's our choice of words, but how important softer skills and those kind of practices are. And I find that in my work as a financial advisor as well. Of course, I want to know, what's coming in and what's going out, and does it go to Roth or traditional? But I think the power of the work we both do is in the soft skills, in the reframing, in the listening, in suggesting practices.
That's right. How do you key in to what's important to you? How much of, and when it's having to do with money, there's so much fear involved. And how do you know if the decisions you're making are fear-based, or are they really based on what you need when you're coming from that sort of centered place?
Right. And I do believe that emotions,
It sounds like,
again, in coaching work as well as in my work, emotions are not to be ignored. I mean, you mentioned knowing, trying to listen to your intuition, and are you being guided, or are you just, caught in a swirl? But listening to intuition is important.
it's super important.
Right.
And you know what? It also, I do believe that it's all really important and that it did move the needle. And it made me just feel better to know that I was doing everything I could possibly do, that I was working on all angles, right? I was doing all the practical stuff, and I was doing every other kind of practice that I could think of to make it happen. That somehow I needed to know that I was doing everything I could possibly do.
And
what's lurking in there? What limiting belief is lurking in there that has brought me to this place? I need to figure that out, address it, lean into it, whatever I need to do. I need to do something so that it's not going to affect me moving forward, or prevent me from getting out of this really scary situation.
And I love that you said that you were able to lean on practices that you had developed before, because I think that's also, we don't want to be rushing to get to know a coach, to get to develop a meditation practice, to get to speak to someone about your money when I can't help myself. I'm a New Yorker. The shit is hitting the fan.
Right.
That's not when you want to do it. That's when you want to have practices in place, relationships in place that they don't have to get up to speed to know you, but they're
Right.
helping.
That's the ideal, right? That's the
That's the
ideal.
idea. Yes.
And the truth is, sometimes it's these things that happen when the shit hits the fan that propel us toward making room for new tools and doing things differently. So sometimes it's about like, are we listening to our intuition? Well, sometimes if we're listening hard enough, we don't need to get to the point where everything blows up because we've been hearing the messages all along. But if we haven't been hearing all the messages all along, well, then the universe is like, all right, like send in something major because like I need to talk louder. She's not hearing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's a paradox. It is very true that sometimes we're just not going to face what we
Sometimes
need
we
to face.
don't. But certainly if you're right, if you come to a difficult situation or challenge with tools that you already have, that you've already practiced, it's, I think, a little easier to lean on those and to remember, oh, yeah, I can do this. This is what I've been practicing for.
Exactly. So how do people find you?
Well, how do they find me? It's really a lot of word of mouth. I'm on Instagram, Photosynthesis Coaching. I'm on LinkedIn, Deborah Donenfeld. I have a website, photosynthesiscoaching.com. That's probably the best way, through my website.
I will post that in show notes, but I'm meaning, you're a resource for people going through a big life change, as you said. How would I know, even I'm going through a big life change, I need some help, I need a coach? That would just have to come from saying that to a friend who knows you?
I guess so. I don't advertise.
Do you do workshops? Doing more workshops?
I have done a couple of workshops. So far, I've done 2 workshops for for women going through divorce, but I am planning to do more workshops. So yeah, certainly that's a way to find me. I mean, people, I guess they Google for a coach. There are a lot of ways that people do come across me, but it's true that I'm not a household name. So not yet anyway.
Not yet. Is that something you aspire to?
I aspire to serving as many people as I can. I think that's the thing about coaches is we love to help people. So I do aspire to serving as many people as I can. Does that mean I need to be a household name? Not necessarily.
Right. So you're not trying to get on Oprah right now, but
Not right now, no.
and how do you
Maybe one day. I don't know.
do you work with people with packages? Is there an expectation of a certain amount of months, or how does that work?
So the way I describe it is the main package is it's weekly sessions and it's a month-to-month situation. So if you decide, you pay monthly, it's a month-to-month situation. And if you decide at any point that this is not right for you, then we'll take a few weeks for closure and be done. But I do ask that people commit for at least 3 months. So because I feel like that's sort of the minimum amount of time for us to get to know each other, see progress, and I feel like it's there. I'm not asking people to commit to me. I'm asking people to commit to themselves. And this is something else about me. Like I like to dig in. When I do something, I have no problem with commitment, right? Like I want to stay, I'm there. I signed up, I'm going to be there every week. And I dig in and want to do the work. And so I like to work with people who want to do the work. And so 3 months feels like that's a minimum. If you can't commit for 3 months, what it says to me is you don't really want to, you're looking for a quick fix, or you aren't really ready to do the work, or that maybe we wouldn't be the right match.
That makes sense. What kind of signposts are you looking for? Is it emotional changes in the people you're working with? Is it outside changes when you try to gauge what kind of movement they're making?
It's, I would say, all of the above, and they are usually linked. There's always going to be an emotional component. You may have very practical things that you want to change, and those things will change. and, with the work. And also, there's going to be an emotional component that comes with it because there always is. And so you have to kind of work on both sides. That's the kind of great thing about coaching, right? Yeah, there's an emotional component and there's a very practical component. There's an action component. And we do want to raise self-awareness and emotional awareness because you can't really have the growth without that. So, and it's each person is different. What are they bringing as the issue and where do they want to go? So if they come to me and they want to make emotional growth, well, then we're going to focus more on that. And if they have very specific things that they want to achieve, then we're going to focus on that.
I love what I'm hearing is that it is so client focused. It's not an any cookie cutter.
Not the way I work, no. And I know that some people really, appreciate a 10-step program, and some coaches work that way. You're going to do step 1 and then 2, and you're going to make it to 10, and then you're done and, fly and be free. But that's not my process.
So that's great that you said, right, this idea maybe that like, oh, you'll fly and be free. Have you redefined for yourself what your end goal is? Which I usually ask this question is, has your definition of success shifted? But I'm not even sure what your definition of success was when you started to even
right
know what the shift is. I guess when you really started after that big change in life was just to know that you're on firm footing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's so for me, personal growth is a lifelong project. Like it's just going to always happen. And that was the goal at that time, get on firm footing, right? And then when I felt like I was on firmer footing, then the goal becomes something else. And so now the goal is, whatever the goal. Now I'm in a place of how can I have a little more control over my calendar, right? How can I maybe work a little bit less? Like how can I figure out a way to have balance? So I think that's sort of where I'm working right now. But it'll change. It'll be something else a year from now and 5 years from now.
Right. Life is about change.
Life is about change. Right?
Whether or not we want it to be. It sounds like you're someone who's to embracing the change you've been through, right? As one of the exercise instructors I work with says, you've lived through, the worst days. You've made it through the worst days of your life. In other words, here we are talking. And
right. Well, and then again, you never know. Right? I don't know what's to come, but hopefully I have the tools and hopefully, there's that Rumi poem. I think it's called The Guest House. We welcome everything, welcome. And hopefully stuff happens. I can be in a frame of mind to welcome it. I know it's not going to feel good. It's not like I'm not going to feel like I'm welcoming it with the same vigor as I would something joyful and exciting. But hopefully I can be in a place where I think, okay, this is for me. This is a gift for me that I don't understand what the gift is exactly. But hopefully I can get to the place where I understand that. Treat it as a gift.
Yes, but it's a worthwhile goal. And perhaps, though it wasn't a direct answer to that question, perhaps that is the definition of success, to have practices in place, support systems in place, relationships in place, work in place that enables you to reframe when there are darker days and there are lighter days, because that is the pulse of the world in which we live, the world, that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that probably going through that experience really changed my definition of success. Like I think for me, success is having financial stability and not having to be anxious about money, having the time to be able to see my kids and spend time with them and to nourish myself, like that it's pretty simple. I don't need to be jet setting or having a big house somewhere, like that's I need to feel.
Yes, and you said another thing as well. You would need to feel financially secure and you want the time. And of course, those are two big trade-offs, money and time. And you said earlier something that really resonated with me, which is that's perhaps your challenge right now. I don't know that there's such a thing as balance, and yet fall victim of the schedules we create for ourselves.
That's right. And I think that's key, right? We are creating them for ourselves. And so we can create something else if we want to.
Thank you. This has been a fun conversation. Is there anything you'd like our listeners to know before?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot. Yeah. I mean, I think I can just say that if anybody is curious or interested or wanting to maybe explore, I offer a free 45-minute consult, and that's, there's always a lot of value in that. I like to make it a robust session. It's almost like a session, really, so that people can really get something out of it. So, there's nothing to lose.
Yes, that's very generous. And I will post that link in the show notes. Really enjoyed our conversation, Deborah. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Deborah Donenfeld, owner of Photosynthesis Coaching. And here are some of the takeaways. Discover the links between one career to the next. Deborah worked for many years as a portrait photographer, and she then decided to pursue coaching. What links these two professions for her is her ability and desire to connect with other people and getting them to trust her so she can get to the essence of who they are. My second takeaway, have a backup plan. Information about a coaching program came into Deborah's inbox at a time when she began to have back problems that she feared would interfere with her photography work. She thought coaching could be her backup plan. Luckily, she no longer has back issues and she runs a successful coaching business. And finally, the more you put the energy out, the more you attract it back to yourself. Deborah noted that she didn't make a conscious decision to focus more on coaching and less on photography. Instead, she loved the coaching so much she began spending more time thinking about it and doing it, so that her practice naturally grew. If this has struck a chord with you, please don't hesitate to reach out if you're in the midst of a life reinvention and would like to use your financial resources well. And are you enjoying this podcast? I'd love it if you would subscribe so you won't miss the next episode. And also, if you would rate and review the show, I'd so greatly appreciate it. It will help others just like you to find it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Making Change with Your Money. Certified financial planner Laura Rotter specializes in helping people just like you organize, clarify, and invest their money in order to support a life of purpose and meaning. Go to www.trueabundanceadvisors.com/workbook for a free resource to help you on your journey. Disclaimer, please remember that the information shared by this podcast does not constitute accounting, legal, tax, investment, or financial advice. It's for information purposes only. You should seek appropriate professional advice for your specific information.